Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money. Today, our guest is Vivian James Rigney. Vivian is a high-power executive coach and a globally recognized expert on leadership and teamwork. He's also a mountaineer and has successfully climbed the highest mountain on all seven continents. His latest one was Mount Everest. And today, we will speak about his book, Naked at the Knife Edge: What Everest Taught Me About Leadership and the Power of Vulnerability. Vivian, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure and great to be here.
So, Vivian, as I was looking into your past, you have been all over the world. You were born in Ireland. You live in the UK, Germany, South Africa, France, Finland, and now New York. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your background, and also you have this amazing career, which is an executive coach. Also, I would like to find out a little bit more about that. So, yeah, can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah, so I left, I grew up in Dublin. You can hear from the twang, the accent never left me. But I left Ireland when I was young, 19 years old, and studied in Dublin and went to the UK, then continued my studies at night. I just wanted to get away. I grew up in a small island. I saw there was a whole world out there, and I decided I wanted the adventure. I wanted to go and, learn a few things about the world. And if I'm honest to myself at the time, I think I wanted to learn about myself too. And grew up one of five boys. So you get the picture: strong family culture. I was number four, so a lot of expectation for me. And I thought it was easier to get out of Ireland and do it on my own and figure out what I wanted, who I was. And so the journey began. So yeah, the world followed and answered me. And it's been an amazing journey thus far, involving obviously a corporate life, my past life, and then moving into executive coaching about just over 15 years ago. And then some interests outside of corporate and coaching along the way. So the mountains you mentioned, and traveling the world, and just learning a lot of new things and putting myself under pressure in certain cases, and stretching myself and knowing where my limits are, and understanding much more about what's involved in those. So it's definitely been a roller coaster of sorts, but I feel certainly humbled by it.
Well, it occurs to me that as an Irish who goes to America, or an English person who goes to America with an English accent, you get to charge more for your service. While if you have an Spanish accent, you have to lower the prices a little bit. But let me ask you, how is it, or what is it that interests you about executive coaching? And is that what you study? And what is it you study? You want to have, I don't know, a bachelor's in executive coaching?
So what caught me into executive coaching, my corporate career, I remember I lived in, as I said, I left Ireland, lived in the UK for a while, then Germany for a while, and then my company moved me to South Africa. And I remember going in, when I moved to South Africa, it was a significantly larger role than I had previously. And if I'm honest to it, they probably over promoted me at the time. And I was really battling in my first 6 months there. And I remember how lonely it felt and how I had no one to talk to. And I internalized everything. I didn't want to tell my family. It was harder than I thought. Didn't want to tell my friends because they didn't understand. Didn't want to tell my boss in case he was worried that I didn't think I was up to it. So I internalized everything, and I made it way more stressful than it probably was, until a point in time where I had to admit that it was not going well and admit that I was failing. And that was painful to come to that decision, but an enormous release when I made that decision to share, because I felt the moment I asked for help, I felt a release of pressure. And luckily what happened, and I think most cases this happens, people respond to wanting to help you. If you ask for help and you're a good person, you have good, you're coming from a good place, most people, the vast majority of people, respond where they genuinely want to help you. And that had a huge impact with me at the time. And years later, I went to business school. I moved back to Europe. I remember reading, and I was working in corporate. I was running a small software company up in Finland. And I remember reading an article in a magazine about executive coaching, and I had an immediate thought, Alan, of wow, I remember, where was that coach when I needed one? I was very lonely in South Africa. I carried the burden of the world on my shoulders. And I made it way harder than it should have been for myself. And I figured a coach would have been a great person to speak to, somebody with no skin in the game, somebody who was just there to help me think through at a higher level. And then started researching it and realized very quickly there was a growing, burgeoning career around executive coaching. And I thought it was a good opportunity for me to make a change. And that's what I did. And I've been doing that ever since in Europe. And then as I came to the United States 15 years ago. So,
wow. And when you're coaching, are you coaching about how to deal with the ups and downs of business life, or are you coaching on business strategy? What exactly are you? I mean, I can visualize a basketball coach, well, of course,
right.
basketball coach has to deal with the emotional, mentally, and physical aspect. In your case, when you are coaching someone, what exactly are you coaching for?
So most people come to me, they're senior leaders, so C-suite or heading towards C-suite. And they're all senior executives. They all have significant responsibilities. And these people are a bit like me. They're lonely in a way. They carry a lot inside, be very careful of what they share with others around them. Most of them are very focused on execution and delivery. Most of them are perfectionists. They're very driven. They're very smart, very seasoned. But they want help, somebody to talk to, somebody who can help them to perform better. That's the premise of it, to perform better. Now that may be in terms of execution of what they're doing, but more often not, it's about how to perform better as a leader, as an influencer, how to build a culture where they can influence people and be effective at scale. And that's where we come into the more softer tissue parts of how do we get under the surface with people, and how do I get them to be much more self-aware of who they are, self-aware of the habits they have, self-aware of the actions they take, and having a reality check on how effective are those, how congruent are those, and peeling back the layers on that. And there's basically what we're talking about doing is helping people to become lighter, to let go of some habits, let go of hijacks, let go of baggage, let go of stuff they worry about that they cannot control anyway. So really it's about being lighter, about being smarter, about being faster, and doing that to the most part in helping to be a better leader, in influencing others at scale. But it has to start with the individual. Until somebody's honest to themselves, they cannot impact others through honesty or building trust. If somebody is not effective or efficient with themselves, it's very hard to ask others or influence others to be efficient in how they do or execute. So that balance is crucial. So there's a big analogy between sports coaching and executive coaching. It is about performance, but it's through the individual.
Wow, thank you so much. Okay, well, you are in your busy life, you are dealing with clients and helping people with their business careers, I guess. How is it that climbing mountains came into the picture?
It's certainly something to do with drive or overdrive in my side. I moved to South Africa. My company moved me down there. I knew Kilimanjaro was in Africa. I had a trip coming up to Tanzania, and as a 26-year-old, I said, "Hey, Kilimanjaro is in Tanzania. How about I have my meetings and I can take a few days off and climb Kilimanjaro?" Little did I know that climbing Kilimanjaro is 6 days climbing. It's not technical, but it's 6,000 meters high, right? It is a tall mountain. You experience altitude sickness, something I'd never experienced before. So, and while I was up there, I heard about the 7 summits. That's the highest peak on each of the world's 7 continents. And I became fascinated with the way that I could see the world. And I always thought I'd never go do Everest, because that was for the people who had way more experience than I had. I'd always do a few of the 7 summits and see how it went. And of course, I started doing them. And then the more of them I achieved, and the wonderful adventures I have along the way, and wonderful, also difficult and definitely stretching in terms of the technical side, fear of heights, in terms of the weather, the places you have to get to, the awkwardness of getting to some of these inaccessible places. I found it in a way very difficult and challenging, but in a way wildly alluring. And I realized I was learning a lot about myself in the process, until obviously, Everest was the 7th of 7. And I did 6 and then asked myself a question: Everest, is it the mountain that's getting in the way of you doing it, or is it you? And I spoke to a guide who was organizing an expedition. He answered every question I asked him, annoyingly, because every question made sense and it sounded as though he knew what he was doing. He'd summited it before. And I realized, I came to that conclusion that it's me that's getting in the way, not the mountain. I had enough experience. I was fit. I was good as part of a climbing team, but I had this mental block. So I basically wrote a big check for a big amount to commit to myself to an expedition. And so began the journey in preparing for Everest.
Okay, so you started climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and you just spoke about the physical effects, like the altitude and the thickness. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the physical challenges? Because I climb a mountain every week, and it takes me 2 hours, and the only side effects that I get is sore legs and maybe the stiff calf the next day. But that's all my body knows. So what is it that your body goes through when you are going to different altitudes?
So in Everest, and the book goes into all the detail of what's involved, but in a summary, it involves 3 rotations to climb Everest. So you're on the mountain for 2 months. How about that? Or the expedition is 2 months long, and you're almost all of that time is on the mountain. So it's like a massive ultra marathon that goes on for 2 months. And we have 3 rotations because we have to take it piece by piece. So we arrive at base camp. That takes about 7 or 8 days to acclimatize. And base camp, you can imagine, is 5,700 meters. Base camp. In old money, that's about 16,000 feet.
And what do you mean by acclimatize?
So if we there are helicopters that ferry people out of base camp, but they don't bring people into base camp, because if people went from sea level to base camp and they get out of the helicopter at 5,700 meters, they'd have problems breathing. They'd have problems staying conscious because there's not enough red blood cells in your body, and your body cannot operate with so little oxygen. So your body reacts to that and it starts to shut down. So, but if you've been acclimatizing, your blood count changes. You've more red blood cells, which means you can operate with less oxygen and still function. And that's why it takes us 8 to 10 days to get in to base camp. And that's why it takes us another 6 weeks after we arrive at base camp to get to the summit, to acclimatize, to move equipment up the mountain, and also wait for the weather window. And, the weather window, Everest is really only climbable in climbing season, in the spring climbing season, for maybe 5 or 6 days maximum. That's it. The rest of the time, the jet stream is pounding that summit with 200 kilometer-hour winds, and there is no access. So this Everest is an enormous project in effort and practice and learning and setbacks. It's like this massive roller coaster the whole time. And hopefully you'll have an opportunity to summit. And whether that ends up, being the case or not, it's up to the mountain and your body and the weather and things. A lot of things you cannot control. So that's what makes it very difficult.
So it takes a couple of days to adjust to just the base camp. And when you go all the way to the summit, your body is adjusting to those different levels of altitude and those different levels of oxygen?
It does. But once you get into the death zone, which is anything above 8,000 meters, are you in metric or feet? Just to check.
Well, here in Canada, everything is metric, but
everything is, of course.
But because we are so close to the US, people have
North America.
Minds.
So it's about everything above 8,000 meters, and that is about 27,000 feet. Then we're in death zone. So basically, your body is dying. From that place, you cannot sustain yourself for long. You can do it for a while, but basically, you're not digesting food properly, so you're not able to. You're using a lot of reserves. You're not able to have cognitive function to the same level. So your brain is not working the same way. Your eyesight is not operating the same way. So the moment you go into, the moment you climb into past the 8,000 meter mark, or 28,000 feet, your body's starting to shut down. So you have a very short amount of time to get the job done and hopefully attempt that summit and come back safely, of course. And most accidents, 80% of accidents happen on the way down. So even when you summit, there's an exponentially higher propensity to have a bad outcome as you return down the mountain. So until you literally get back to base camp, there's enormous risk, and you're aware of that at every moment that you're on that mountain. It's a dangerous place to be, and a very humbling place to be because of that.
So not only you have to be physically prepared, but mentally prepared. Let me ask you, did your job as an executive coach help you to be mentally prepared? And on the coming back, did you climbing the mountain help your job as an executive coach?
Good question. I thought it helped me to get on the mountain. So I thought I was well prepared. I climbed mountains before. I learned a lot about myself in the process. I thought I'd internalize the learnings until I got to Everest. And then I realized that I still had a lot to learn. And Everest is an obstacle course every single day. Your life is flashing in front of your eyes every day above base camp. There are threats all around you, crevasses, avalanches, incredibly steep rock pitches, ice screws that no guarantees that they're fully held, and your people with you who also have problems and may be sick. And so enormous impacts. And when I got to that level of complexity, I found that I didn't necessarily have the resources I thought I had. And my drive to do my best and push forward was not enough. And that one went through a very difficult personal journey, particularly on summit day, a day of 22 hours, by the way, where I seriously hit the wall. And there's a lot of detail around that. And I felt immense exposure and vulnerability. And I didn't really know why I was there. And that for me was an experience I've never had in my life before. I didn't know why I was there. All this effort, all this commitment, all this, drive to be on the tallest mountain on the earth, and I'm on summit day, and I'm asking myself, why are you here? And who are you to be here? And that was a massive, massive rupture inside me. And we did get to the summit. There's a very, very wild story around that and how I got down. But I think I came down the mountain with an acute sense of, if I do things in life, I need to know why I'm doing them. The other thing around what I learned a lot about was legacy. And the question I asked myself, on that summit day was, if something were to happen to me at this moment on the mountain, how would people remember me? Would they remember me because of what I've achieved? And lots of achievements. I left when I was 19. I went to this country. I did this job. I succeeded there. I got promoted. I went to business school. I achieved there. Or would they remember me for how I made them feel? And the question was, what would real legacy be? And the answer in my head that kept coming at me, the achievements would last like a thunderstorm, a few moments. No one would really remember that. But the legacy on how I made them feel, that would be the thing that would be meaningful, that would improve or add value to their lives. And I came down the mountain with an acute sense of that matters more than anything else. And I like to think, when it came back to answer your question about the coaching piece, that has become a core part of my coaching in terms of purpose, people having purpose, people being connected with themselves, being at peace with themselves, meaning reducing the noise, the inner dialogue in our heads, reducing the energy burn, the waste, and having that pure, honest conversation with self by being aware, and then being extremely effective with how to apply that in the everyday, in leading people, in influencing, in trying to do things to be impactful at as I said, at a scalable level. So quite interesting how that whole thing came full circle.
Well, you did climb this Mount Everest, but do you think many of us live life of quiet desperation, and we had to try to find our own Mount Everest to climb in order to find meaning and purpose in life? Or can we just do without that Mount Everest in our life, whatever that may be, and just continue living a life of quiet desperation?
Yeah, I think most of us live in the idea that we're on a conveyor belt, and life is this conveyor belt that just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. And as I was, the difference is I'm on Everest at 39 years of age and realized I don't want to be on this conveyor belt. I don't know why I'm on this conveyor belt. Who am I in this conveyor belt? And many of us I may have continued my whole life until my old age. And maybe with a bit of luck, I could be, someone in my 70s who would have chilled out a bit and go, you know what? Life was not about what I thought it was about. It was about this, this, and this. So I was lucky to get that shock, but it was miserable at the time because it was very painful. But the idea that I think the idea is, look, we all have our own Everests, every one of us. Maybe a dream that we think is beyond our reach, maybe a setback, maybe bereavement, maybe a huge earthquake or challenge in our lives that feels just very hard to get our heads around. And yet it's there and we don't have a choice. But I think if we dig deep inside us, we have way more resources than we give ourselves credit for. I think we have to understand or learn that the conveyor belt is a state of mind as opposed to reality. And if we take the control of that back, take control of that in order to be more alive, more humble and vulnerable, and yet stronger, an ability to find our voice and to be able to move others, but coming from ourselves in the process, that gives fulfillment. And I think all of us want to be fulfilled on some level at least, and not be on a conveyor belt with an anesthetic of busyness all the time. Busy, busy, busy. The clock runs. There's two things in life I think we have a finite amount of. One is time. We don't get it back. The clock never goes backwards. The second thing is energy. We have a finite amount of energy. And if we waste it, it's gone. We either have to wait for recharge or whatever, but just appreciating those two things gives us way more control than we would imagine. Again, I'm simplifying things down to their core, but when it comes down to it, I firmly believe that that's what it boils down to.
Well, I knew about time, but this is the first time I think about the limited amount of energy that I have throughout my life and throughout my days, and I can only be alert and active for a few hours actually, and then it is up to me to how better invest those hours or how to waste them. But let me ask you, so many of us, of course, we will not climb Mount Everest to find meaning and purpose. What could be that one thing that a regular individual listening to this podcast could do to try to find their own Mount Everest?
I think one has to listen to the inner dialogue, listen to ourselves. I think a lot of people are, including me, on my past journey. And look, I'm not perfect, so I'm learning every day on this. The two things I think we're over concerned with, first of all, is the ego, what I want to believe about me. And then the persona is what I want other people to believe about me. And this world we're in with social media, we're in about stimulation, left, right, and center. Everything's about stimulation. Everything is about, immediate gratification or worrying about what other people think. We're consumed by that inner dialogue, right? Of what I should be, what I must be, as opposed to what I want, and listening to that. And I think in many cases we can ignore our intuition, ignore that compass that does face north within us. I ask clients two core questions. When you have a strong intuitive feeling about something, what percent of the time is that borne out to be absolutely correct? And the answer I get back is typically something like 70 to 90% of the time, my intuition is absolutely right. The vast majority of the time, Vivian. Next question I ask is, what percent of the time do you act upon it unreservedly? And the answer comes back on average about 50% of the time. Think of that. You have intuition that's so good, but we hit the brake instead of the accelerator on it. And I'm not talking about you have to act on every piece of intuition, but it's centered around fear of failure. Mm. If a chance I'll screw up or get it wrong, I don't want to take that chance. Yet they're missing the 70, 80, 90% of that chance of it landing right of it being fulfilled, of it being meaningful, of it mattering to something, of it having impact on people that's worthy, that people remember and they feel good about. And that's that common theme of feeling good about yourself. And thereafter, you can be good with others. A bit like the airplane. You get on the plane, first thing they say is, in the event of a loss in cabin pressure, we all know this very well, put your mask on first, and only then put it on your cute 3-year-old or your baby. And it's counterintuitive, but sometimes the simple things are the most valuable. And that's where I think this lands.
Wow, Vivian. Well, I'm so grateful that you allow us to live your experience through your book. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book, and where can the listeners find out more about the work that you're doing, or where can they find more information? Yeah, the book, you, and social media, your business, etc.
Of course. So the easiest way is I have a website. So it's www.vivianjamesrigney.com. That's simple. And obviously I have the book there. The book is available on hardback version, on ebook, and also audio. So I went to a studio and I had to read my own book. That was another little Everest.
Congratulations.
Three ways, whichever way you like it, there's an ability to go there. There's also the keynote piece. I go around and I speak around the world on taking people up Everest. And then I have the coaching piece and what I do every day. So it'll give people a bit of a view of all the things I do and how I do it. So.
Well, I was reading the book on the digital version, but I think I'm going to get the audio. I listen mostly to books, and I do like your Irish accent. So,
yeah, you get all the yang, and if you get the real book, then you get all the photographs, right? So there's a little something for everyone, right? So,
well, Vivian, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me along.